Hey, what's going on everyone? This is Joyinfest back with another video, and today I have a different kind of video for you guys. As mentioned in last week's video, I'm running short of Predator gameplay videos to showcase to you guys. So for this week, I'll set do a quick general guide on Howitzer in the mid lane. The reason why I'm doing a quick guide on Howi in particular is because the main series revealed his latest kit version, which includes one reworked basic ability and a brand new ultimate that looks absolutely sick. So in this overview guide, I'm going to briefly talk about these changes and the impact this will have on Howi's identity and predecessor, as well as discussing some theory-crafted builds that may be solid on him going into early access. Just a disclaimer, this guide is based on limited information we have from the stress test and what's been reviewed in those recent blog posts. Things are definitely subject to change, but this guide should hopefully give you guys a better understanding on how to play Howi going to early access later this year. To start off, I thought it would be important to first mention how they categorize Howitzer's role in the roster, which is to label him as an entirely mage. This is important to mention because the meta series seems to be quite specific on how these roles are defined, which can tell us the design philosophy approach for all these heroes being put back into this game. For example, they categorize Decker and Richter as support heroes, with a specific role being a disruptor support. From this image, you can see exactly how they define disruptors, which essentially they are supports with kits specialized for enemy lockdown and crowd control rather than buffing their team through heals and shields. And that was exactly how they went to rework Dekko's kit to fit the description. And now going back to Howi, again they call him an entirely mage. And the role keyword here is mage, like for the heroes that are really good for the mid lane role. And for mages in particular, there are three kinds of mages as confirmed by internal testing lead. There are artillery mages, control mages, and battle mages. So essentially in the way it was described to me, battle mages are mages who have larger health pools and less burst damage potential, but instead deal more consistent magical damage over time, and Gadget was one example that has these characteristics. Control mages have less overall magical damage output, but has a lot more crowd control and abilities to shut down key targets, making them potent in teamfights. Lieutenant Belka is one example of a control mage. And finally, artillery mages are ones who can effectively whittle down their enemies with long-range abilities, while also having utility and potential burst capabilities. And Howi, looking at his latest reworked kit, definitely fit this role. So essentially, the two biggest changes to Howi's kit is its new alternative ability and his new ultimate. So you can kind of see here in the trailer they posted, well, essentially instead of being like three kind of random mines you kind of shoot in front of you, you now instead shoot this one initial mine that spreads around like 15 of these in a small area around it. And this is a really solid change because his original slow grenades always felt a little clunky to use and didn't quite have as much value as an ability you expect from a mid laner. So with this new change, it now looks to be a solid zoning tool where you can really slow down enemies and better control the space around him, especially when you find those tight spaces in the jungle. And the most exciting change to his kit is his brand new ultimate, which now instead of just going up to the air and having a kill cooldown reduced just 1.5 seconds, you can now instead fire a ton of missiles at your enemies over 3 seconds. And now I'm a huge fan of this rework because back in the April stress test, it always felt a little clunky. It was a really cool ability flying up in the air, but the problem is it just felt like it was a little disconnect. Well, you're flying in the air, but then for me personally, it kind of just feels a little like not smooth. Just have to keep mashing the Q button to get the most damage output from this ultimate. But now in this new rework, we can see now you spray and pray all your missiles down your enemies over a shorter duration, which I thought was a really cool change. And I was actually not sure if this ultimate was a lock-on ability or not, until one of the founders of Amir Studios confirmed that missiles is an aim ability that follows your cursor and not a lock-on. And you can kind of see here, it's hard to see initially, but there's kind of like a blue kind of pointer or like kind of indicator of where you're like aiming your cursor at, and that's what the missiles are following when you're like using your ability. And I thought this having like this missiles being a aim ability is really good choice, as not only makes this ultimate have more skill expression, but also allows better control of what enemies you actually want to focus on and bust down in those team fights. There's actually one more change that they made to Howi that's worth pointing out, is that they tweak his secondary ability, which is his landmine. Before, as you can see from this old picture back in April, this ability used to do normal ground targeting, but now as a skill shot lob, you will throw the ability in the arc, which you can kind of see from this ability where it's not like a confirmed ability, you just kind of throw out in the arc. And they describe it as being something really similar to how you would use Deca's stasis bomb, where you just shoot it out in the lob similarly, which I think is sort of enough to its ability because it raises the skill floor of using this ability effectively, but at the same time it seems to be a lot more responsive to use. So with this new change, it'll be harder to use the landmine and making the enemies go in the exact direction you want them to go, while at the same time it seems like an improvement and better reacting to the enemies gain on top of you. So now if I were to recommend which abilities to max first, I think his first one should definitely be his R2000 missile. This is just going to be your primary source of damage and poke in his kit. And then his second ability you should max secondly is it's going to be his landmine. And the reason why we want to max out his landmine, because if you look at the scaling on his slow grenades, you don't get any cooldown reduction with any levels. So the only thing you're actually increasing is the damage and slow. The slow is pretty nice, but you see like the damage overall is like really low actually. It's only about 150 at max rank with 25% scaling for that first initial hit. And then when they get hit by more of those mines, you're only adding in about negligible like amounts of extra damage. So this ability, it's not going to be really used much for like damage purposes. It's going to be used to just slow down your enemies, and this ability you don't really need to like max second. You should definitely max your landmine second because you get a whopping 8 seconds in reduction of your cooldown your landmine, and this is just a very potent ability that can really turn the tide of team fights if used correctly and has a lot better damage scaling. So you definitely want to do this second, and then your last one should be your slow grenade. So now we're going to transition to theorycrafting some potential good builds for him going to early access. Now, just a disclaimer again, these items in particular are definitely subject to change. Some of these numbers, scaling, or even effects may change. But after like going through all these different items from the last stress test, they were just really well thought out and there's some really cool unique items. So I'll definitely be really surprised if of most of these items we see very dramatic changes. So I'll be using this website to go over some potential good items on Howi going to early access. And this is made by a Discord community member, Noxious. And I'm actually going to leave my camera over here because so I don't cover up all these items. But essentially this is just a really good valuable resource. You can just quickly go through, you can filter through what kind of stuff you want to look for in particular. And just see how items are built, and just overall it's a lot more convenient to like use this website compared to trying to go through like old random footage on YouTube. So for this first build, it's just gonna be the just kind of standard mage build, just trying to max out the damage output from your abilities. And so you're gonna start off with the magician quests on Howi, and then for your final evolution item, it's gonna be E-Push, Time Flux Band, and Soul Bearer. And out of these 3 items, it's either gonna be between E-Push and Time Flux Band. Because from my experience using the Soul Bearer item, it's not that large of a shield. You need to like make a build that builds a ton of mana to effectively have a large enough shield that's useful. So for this kind of build, we're not building that much mana on how we're just gonna focus more on damage stats and abilities. So it's gonna be between E-Push and Time Flux Band depending on the situation you find yourself in against certain team comps. If you find yourself against a team comp that either has a ton of CC or just a lot of burst damage or scale up, then I think E-Push is going to be your solid choice. It's just essentially like stasis from League of Legends where you use it and you're just invulnerable. So if you were to get stunned out of your ultimate and get caught out, you can pop this and that will buy you some more time for your team to follow up and help you rescue from a bad situation. Or if you feel pretty confident that you're not gonna get caught out, you're not afraid of CC, or you're not afraid of all the burst damage, what you can instead build is a Time Flux Band. And this is quite a unique item because you essentially mark your location and after 4 seconds you teleport back to that original position. And the kicker is you reset all your basic ability cooldowns. And Howie is someone that has high ability cooldown, especially on his landmine field and his knockback bomb. So this can be quite a very powerful item to use. So you start the fight dumping all your abilities on the enemies, and then you can use this, and then after 4 seconds you walk back, and then you can just get all your ability refunds back more. So you essentially can do a little bit more burst damage potentially with this kind of ban, or do some really creative stuff with it overall. As for the kind of item that seems going to be really solid on how we go into early access, if we assume these items don't really change that many changes, the kind of items that seem like they're going to be really good on him are going to be these kind of passives where essentially by doing separate instances of magical damage, you build these like stacks that give different benefits depending on the item. For this item, particularly Dreambinder, when you deal magical damage to a hero, you do increasing magical damage stealth by 3%, so at max stacks you get 50% magical damage increase. And at first it seems like this can be something kind of hard to pull off initially, but for someone like Howie, he can actually do this quite easily because of some of the changes he got. And that is, first his minefield. We saw that there are 16 different possibility bombs within that ability, and each one should count as a separate application of magical damage. So they just need to walk through a couple of these bombs in that minefield, and all of a sudden you'll add the max stacks. So using this slow grenade really well and ensuring that most of the mines get hit means all of a sudden you got max stacks on that one item. And not only that, you'll make it rain because now it's like 12 missiles you spam at your enemies. Each one should count as a separate instance of damage too. So that again makes building the 5 or 6 or whatever number of stacks quite easily. So these kind of items are definitely going to be really strong on him. So this passive really works well with him. And this one also, the second passive also works really good because damage abilities will slow them by additional 20%. So when you put this in your minefield, they're getting slowed down even more. Or when you use your ultimate and you're spraying your rockets down, when they're getting hit by that, they're getting slowed down. And that makes it easier for you to chase them down or keep your missiles on them to finish them off. So the next item that's actually gonna seem like work really well on Howie is also Combustion. And this is the same kind of mechanic as Dreambinder. Well, one of the passives, when you damage an enemy target, you gain stacks essentially. Like for this one, when you attack them with the ability of basic attack, you restore maximum mana stacking up to 4 times, and when you hit those max stacks, you gain the ability haste. So this again plays into Howie's Kit, where it's pretty easy to do a lot of different instances of magical damage, so you can really start to reap the benefits of these max stack effects. And this one also comes with a pretty nice edit passive where you just do increased damage at the start of team fights essentially. And this edit item, this one's also solid. Again, this one, as you deal magical damage, you gain increasing magical damage, and at max stacks, you get 10% movement speed. So this again can be a really good solid item on Howie. But aside those kind of items I mentioned, there's also Megagasm, which doesn't have a stacking mechanic, but anytime you do any instance of magical damage in one ability, you essentially start to burn them based on the maximum health, so it's good for against tanks, so just really amplifies your poking capabilities overall. And lastly, some other like items that seem like it can be solid and depending on the situation. One being Spellbreaker, because the one thing it might be a scale of is CC, especially when it's ulting, and the last thing you want is you in the air and the deck stuns you out of the air, and then all of a sudden you start firing your missiles and you become really sad. So it's something like this where you can get a spell shield, like while your ult can be really good in ensuring that you won't get stunned out your key abilities. Outside of that, you also have Oblivion Crown. This is just a huge stat stack. You just massively increase your magical damage. And lastly, there should be a magical penetration iron, which can be making your Qs, so just all your abilities just hit way harder. And so for this alternative build, I'm gonna quickly go over. This is actually not my original idea. This is a build I saw that another content creator by the name of Pinso Dunso actually upload, where he made this build for both the mid lane and then did another video of this as an ADC. And essentially what this build does is that it makes Howi like a hybrid mage ADC kind of like character. And the reason why this kind of like hybrid ADC mage build can work on Howi is because he has a lot of self-heal in his own kit. So going back to his kit, you first have your landmine, you can knock enemies away from you, you can use it to knock yourself away from the enemies. It's just a really good like get off me kind of tool. And then you have your slow grenade, which can further like hamper their speed, gives you more breathing room to like auto them down. And then the kicker is you still have your ultimate, which you up in the air for 3 seconds, rain down missiles on you. So you just in Howi's kit, you just have so much self-heal, so much stalling abilities. So the enemies can't exactly like, once they're on top of you, you have so many ways to get them off of you essentially. And so the way this build works for Howi is you first want to grab Opulent Quest, so you can grab this item called Typhoon, which gives magical power and attack speed. And one of the passives is when you do basic attacks on enemies, you get a stack of Typhoon, and at max stash, you can then use that to dash in the current direction and reduce your basic ability cooldown. So this is just a really solid like mage kind of hybrid AC item. Like if you want to go the mage hybrid AC route, you definitely want Typhoon to enable this kind of build. And the other two items you definitely need to grab is first Prophecy. This is essentially like Nashor's Tooth from League of Legends, where you basically attacks deal bonus magical damage on hit. So since all the items you're building are magical damage, you need this item to make sure that your auto attacks get magical scaling, so you can actually hit hard with your basic attacks. And then lastly, Elite Frost is something you definitely need because it gives more attack speed, but also when you do basic attacks, it slows the enemy targets, and at max stats you actually root the target. So you're not exactly gonna hit as hard as an ADC because you won't have crits in your basic attacks. But essentially, you can have these kind of items where you just really enhance. You do a lot more damage on your basic attacks, and you can also start to like slow them and just better kite all these enemies essentially. And on top of that, you can still do some considerable damage on your ability since you're still building magical damage with this build. You're just not gonna hit as hard on your basic abilities compared to a typical mage build. You're just gonna have more overall balance damage between your abilities and your auto attacks. What's going to be another solid item on Howi for this kind of like hybrid mage ADC build is going to be Magnify, which just allows you use abilities. Your next 2 basic attack afterwards will do increased bonus magical damage, which is really good for this kind of build. And of course, Waist Leggings is another solid item because it's going to give you that movement speed that you need to chase down people and kite better as kind of like an ADC quote unquote. And this Spell Breaker is just another solid item because since you're going to be more in their face, having a spell shield can definitely allow you to play a little bit more safely in these like skirmishes. Oh yeah, these are kind of essentially the kind of items that is going to be potentially really good on Howi. Again, we gotta have to get our hands on early access and play around with these builds to figure out what exactly is the best way to build Howi. Because again, some of these items may be subject to change, but also there may potentially be new items get added in early access later this year that weren't present in the last stress test. But yeah, that's about everything I wanted to cover in this Howitzer guide. This was a bit longer than I thought it would be for a general guide, but I hope all this information made sense to you guys and give you guys a better understanding what Howi's role is going to be with these new changes and what key items are going to be really solid on him going to early access later this year. Definitely let me know in the comments below what you guys think of this kind of video and if you want to see more of these kind of videos as we wait for early access later this year. If you have not already, please subscribe to the channel as we are not only getting closer to 500 subs to unlock the community tab, but we're also starting to get closer to 1,000 subscribers, which is one of the biggest milestones for a new YouTube channel and will really support me in continuing to make these predecessor videos. So thank you guys again for all the awesome support and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.